Okay, so I'm going to do my speech on public schools being better than private schools. I'm going to talk about how attending public schools as opposed to private schools is the best decision for children and teens. My major claim is while private schools make us question certain values that have been instilled in our lives, public schools enforce these values in ways such as exposing you to real-life situations, encouraging the skill of making your own choices, and even offering classes that fit your individual needs. A few definitions before I start on my claims. A private school is a school established and controlled privately and supported by endowment and tuition. And a public school is a tuition-free school in the U.S. supported by taxes and controlled by a school board. So let's start with the first major difference between a private school and a public one in my first secondary claim, which is exposure to real-life situations. According to a study at UC Berkeley, public schools offer more diversity, larger school environments, more focus on community, better opportunities to learn survival skills, more independence, and more academic and athletic options. When I first personally made the transition from private school to public, the first dramatic change that I noticed was the fact that I no longer had to wear a uniform. Although this seems like such a minor issue, it is one of the many so-called freedoms that I was finally able to take advantage of in a public school. In private schools, we are sheltered in a way from the real world and the situations that it brings. An example of this would be the exposure to sex, drugs, and alcohol that occur in most public high schools all around the nation. It may sound bad when I say it, but it's true. I learned more in 1 year at a public high school than I did in 9 years at a private one. Not only did I now have the ability to access more of my freedoms as a person, but I was presented with situations that I wasn't used to at first, like the first time I was ever offered alcohol. But I would have rather dealt with it at that time with teachers, friends, and mentors that I could turn to surrounding me rather than later on in life when I'm completely on my own with no one to guide me. Now this leads me into my second point and secondary claim of how public schools encourage you to make your own choices rather than force them on you like private schools do. Two separate surveys taken in 2007 and 2008 by the National Center for Education Statistics show that 1, 80% of students enrolled in private schools had a religious orientation or purpose, and 2, more private school students were enrolled in kindergarten than in any other grade level. What do these two surveys have in common? Well, they both show how being put into a private school forces ideals on you rather than gives you the opportunity to make these decisions on your own. When I transferred to a public school in high school, I was exposed to the world of debates, something we really didn't have in private schools. These debates actually allowed us to support and speak up for what we believed in, regardless of what those beliefs were. We didn't have a teacher telling us which way to believe, or rather than giving us an opportunity to form our own beliefs. These are examples of how public schools can be considered pro-choice, because they give you the opportunity to make your own decision on what to believe in, rather than force the beliefs on you through some sort of rigorous curriculum in a private school. Now let's look at the final secondary claim of how public schools offer all types of classes to fit your educational needs. In July 2006, an article was posted in the New York Times that stated, because private schools don't receive government money, they are free to create their own curriculum, fund programs however they wish to, set their own requirements, and establish their own admissions processes. I only knew one person in my transition to a public high school. Her name was Liz, and I knew her through the softball league that I was in outside of school. However, she had been homeschooled her whole life because she was about 2 grades behind intellectually than the rest of us. So to see her at the same high school the first day was a shock to me because I knew that she couldn't go to my old school for the sole reason that they just didn't accept people like her. Not only do public schools accept these so-called special needs children, they also offer certain classes that focus in on the individual needs of the students, something my old private school didn't offer. Because public schools are funded by the government, they have to follow laws such as the No Child Left Behind Act and meet certain curriculum requirements so as every need is met for children in some form or another. So we have now looked at a few reasons as to why attending a public school is better than a private one. The first being that they expose you to real-life situations at an early age, so you can be greatly influenced by the family, friends, and mentors surrounding you. The second reason having to do with pushing you to make your own choices, especially when dealing with your own individual beliefs. And the final reason involving the offering of special needs classes so as to truly ensure that no child is left out of receiving an education. So the choice is simple then. Go to a public school, send your children to a public school, it's the right thing to do. Thank you.
All right, the proposition is awkwardly phrased, and you seem to have the preview in the proposition at the same time. So I do kind of see where the speech is going here, but you need to separate the declarative proposition from the secondary supporting propositions a little bit. You did do a good job internally labeling those points as you went through the speech, so that helped a little bit. And at the end of the speech, I thought you had a nice review of what the main points were, and that helps establish what the structure was a little bit more as well. On the first point, you're kind of dependent on examples here, and I think that you need to have a little bit more than your own personal examples. For instance, if people's exposure to sex, drugs, and assorted other things in public schools makes them less likely to get involved in sex, drugs, and other things, then you ought to have some statistic that says so. Your inference seems to be because you didn't get exposed to it, you don't know how to deal with it, and I'm not sure that you have any proof on that. That seems to be a presupposition. On the second point, the one statistic that you had on the number of schools that are private schools that have religious affiliation, there again seems to be an assumption that therefore something is being forced on the kids, and you use your personal experience as an example on that, and that's not a bad way to start, but we ought to have some data that shows that that is in fact what most of the schools do. Maybe you went to a particularly onerous private school, I don't know. You're not allowed to ask questions, you're not allowed to disagree, they don't have debates. That's a strange one because some of the finest debate programs in Southern California are associated with the religious schools, so it's a little strange that you have that inference that's going on there, and it seems to be based on personal experience. I thought you did a nice job presenting for the most part, and one of the problems is that the evidence seems to depend on examples, and although there are a couple of statistics, the statistics don't necessarily support the supporting claim. They're just background information on that subject without advancing the inference that you're making there. All right, thank you.